Before Congress and 60 million Americans, Jasmine Crockett rips open the secret Melania. Trump never wanted exposed her plan to divorce Donald Trump, a revelation that shatters the First Lady's image and shakes America to its core. Cameras flash, senators gasp, and the world watches a dynasty collapse in real time. What happens when loyalty is nothing but a lie? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The United States Congress chamber burned with light, every camera blinking red, broadcasting live to tens of millions. Reporters crammed, shoulder to shoulder, microphones stretched forward, flash bulbs firing like a relentless storm. The silence was electric heavy, as if the whole nation was holding its breath. This was no ordinary hearing. It was a live battlefield, and everyone knew something explosive was about to detonate. At the witness table sat Jasmine Crockett, the young congresswoman, with eyes like sharpened steel. She leaned in, calm but dangerous, radiating the energy of someone holding a weapon of truth. Across from her, Melania Trump sat tall, flawless, in her elegance every inch the First Lady. Yet behind the perfect mask, her eyes flickered restless, betraying a pulse of fear. This was no longer politics. This was marriage on trial, a secret poised to shatter the image of America's most guarded woman. The world braced for impact. The silence after Jasmine's opening words was unbearable, and then she moved. Slowly, she reached into her stack of documents and laid a bright red binder on the table. The title stamped across the front glared under the lights: Draft Divorce Agreement, November 2016. Reporters leaned forward, lenses stretched, and the chamber rippled with gasps. This was no rumor. This was a file pulled straight into the heart of power. Jasmine flipped the binder open, her voice steady, deliberate. This draft was prepared by Robert S. Cohen, she announced, the New York divorce attorney who has represented Michael Bloomberg and Christie Brinkley. A man known for shielding the rich and powerful, yet even he cannot shield this. The name dropped like a hammer. The weight of Cohen's reputation made the room feel even smaller, as if the walls were closing in on Melania. Then Jasmine lifted the third page and held it high so the cameras could capture every word. On the screen behind her, the handwriting appeared magnified. If he loses, I leave with my son immediately. If he wins, I wait longer. At the bottom, in hurried strokes, sat the initials MT. The air left the chamber in a rush. Chaos erupted. Flash bulbs popped like machine gun fire. Reporters shouted over one another, phones buzzed with push alerts. On Twitter, the words "secret divorce agreement exposed" trended in seconds. Senators leaned forward, whispering urgently, their eyes darting between Jasmine and Melania. Across America, living rooms filled with stunned silence. The image of the First Lady as a loyal partner was cracking in real time. Melania shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her eyes blazed with fury, her voice sharp, commanding, dripping with disdain. This is an outrageous fabrication. A draft by a lawyer can be forged at any time. I am the First Lady of the United States, not a character in some cheap script. Her words were designed to strike fear, to reassert control, to remind the room of her stature. For a heartbeat, she seemed almost untouchable. But Jasmine never flinched. She reached into her folder again and pulled out a second report stamped and sealed with the FBI insignia. Holding it high, she spoke with calm precision. No one forged this. The handwriting has been analyzed by federal examiners. It matches your White House Christmas letters with 98.7% accuracy. This is not gossip. This is black and white truth from your own lawyer's office. The chamber went silent, suffocatingly still. Melania's mask faltered, her lips tightening, her hands gripping the desk until her knuckles turned white. Senators stared, staffers froze, the press held their breath. The audience gasped as a sound like the roar of a wave crashing through marble walls. And in that silence, the world saw it. The First Lady's perfect armor was splintering. The truth had landed, and there was no turning back. The chamber was still vibrating from the shock of the document when Melania lowered herself back into her chair. She crossed her arms with deliberate grace. Every movement polished her chin, lifted like royalty under siege. Her voice cut through the noise, steady and sharp. A draft means nothing. I have stood by my husband in every moment of history. Who are you to attack me? A young, inexperienced congresswoman. What do you know of marriage? The words echoed, dripping with contempt and authority. Across the room, a few conservative lawmakers nodded, murmuring approval. Their subtle gestures gave Melania the illusion of control, as if the tide had turned back in her favor. She sat taller, her eyes burning with pride, savoring the silence she had forced into the chamber. For a moment she looked untouchable again, the First Lady reclaiming her stage. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned back slightly, a faint smile curling at the corner of her lips, calm in the storm. Her reply was soft yet piercing, every syllable aimed straight at the heart of the chamber. I know marriage is love, not a contract, and I know the truth always finds its way into the light. The words hung heavy, sharp as glass. The audience froze, their breath caught in their throats, waiting. Something bigger was coming, and everyone could feel it. The silence after Jasmine's quiet smile didn't last. She suddenly lifted her hand and gave a sharp signal. The lights dimmed, and a giant LED screen behind her flickered to life. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the familiar footage rolled. The 2017 inauguration, the moment the world had seen, but never truly understood. Donald Trump extended his hand, expecting the gesture of unity, but Melania's face hardened, her eyes dark, and she pulled back. The crowd in the chamber shifted uneasily, the sound of shuffling feet and low murmurs rising like a tide. Jasmine's voice cut in, cold and deliberate. Watch closely, she instructed, as the footage slowed to a painful crawl. Every blink, every twitch was magnified. Melania's hand retreating, her jaw tightening, her eyes flashing something cold and unreadable. Across the bottom of the screen, white letters blazed like a verdict, a wife or a prisoner. The words hovered as the scene played again in the slow motion. Reporters gasped, hands flying to their mouths, while millions at home leaned closer to their televisions. The noise swelled in the chamber, whispers turning into full-throated chatter. Senators exchanged looks, staffers scribbled furiously, and journalists barked into phones. Across the country, living rooms lit up with recognition. Americans remembered that moment, that fleeting second when something felt wrong. And now, connected with the divorce draft, it was no longer just gossip. It was evidence, raw and visible, the kind no lawyer could easily dismiss. Melania reacted like a whip. She sat straighter, her eyes flashing with controlled fury. Her voice sliced through the chamber, sharp and imperious. A single moment of fatigue cannot define a marriage. I am human, not a mannequin. Do not twist 1 second of my life into your theater of lies. Her words dripped with disdain, her accent crisp, her tone a blend of authority and outrage. She held her chin high like a queen defending her throne. For a heartbeat, it felt as if she had seized back the narrative. But Jasmine struck again, calm but merciless. She leaned into the microphone, her voice steady, her words a hammer. No, that was not fatigue. That was not chance. That was the look of a woman holding back the truth of a secret divorce agreement. The eyes of someone chained not by love, but by power. Her tone carried no hesitation, no apology. Each syllable slammed into the silence, stripping away Melania's defense like armor falling to the ground. The effect was devastating. The chamber went still, as though every person inside had been robbed of air. Reporters froze, mid-scribble, cameras locked in unblinking focus, and senators shifted in their seats but said nothing. The tension was suffocating, and the silence roared louder than any applause or protest could. All eyes turned back to Melania, waiting, pressing, demanding a reaction. The camera zoomed in on her face, magnified across the LED screen. Her lips trembled, her throat tightened, but no words came out. For the first time, Melania Trump, impeccable, untouchable, untarnished, looked trapped. The audience outside the chamber saw it too, millions watching live across America. A gasp rolled through the room like thunder, the kind of sound that marks the breaking point in a drama. No one moved, no one spoke. Melania sat there silent, her image cracking in real time under the weight of truth. And Jasmine sat across from her, steady as stone, knowing the battle had shifted again. The silence after the last blow hung heavy when Jasmine moved again. With a slow, deliberate gesture, she reached under the table and pulled out a small velvet box, deep blue, and glowing under the chamber lights. She placed it on the desk with a soft thud that felt louder than thunder. Then, with a flick of her fingers, the box opened. Inside, a Cartier diamond ring burst under the lights, blinding in its brilliance, the kind of stone that screamed wealth and intention. The audience leaned forward as one breath held. Jasmine's voice was sharp, clear, leaving no room for doubt. This is a divorce ring, ordered on October 25th, 2016. The invoice states in plain words, "For new life." As she spoke, the LED screen behind her lit up, displaying the actual receipt in bold letters. The name was unmistakable, Melania Naus Trump. The room erupted instantly. Senators shouted, reporters screamed into phones. Cameras flashed so fast the chamber looked like a lightning storm. Melania's reaction was swift and icy. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice cold as steel, her eyes narrowed into slits. "I have the right to buy jewelry. You want to twist a diamond into evidence. This is a cheap tactic beneath the dignity of this chamber." Her tone dripped with scorn, every syllable aimed like a blade at Jasmine. For a second, the balance of power seemed to tilt back toward her, as if elegance alone could crush the accusation. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her expression unflinching. "No one is condemning a diamond. But when you write 'for new life,' it stops being jewelry. It becomes a confession." Her words landed with deadly precision, slicing through the cold arrogance in Melania's voice. The chamber froze again. Reporters stopped mid-sentence, cameras locked on Melania, and senators stared wide-eyed. The silence was deafening, like the moment before a bomb goes off. And then Jasmine struck harder. She raised her hand again, and the speakers in the chamber crackled to life. "Let's hear the truth in your own voice," she said. A recording played, scratchy but clear. It was Melania, her tone low, intimate, unmistakable, speaking to her personal secretary. "The new ring is ready. I'll wear it when freedom finally comes. No one else can know. Not him. Not anyone." Gasps ripped through the hall like gunfire. Reporters screamed, phones slipped from hands, and members of Congress lurched forward as if the weight of the room had suddenly shifted. The words hung heavy, dripping with implication, a coded message that revealed more than any document ever could. Melania's face went pale, her lips parting, but no sound coming out. Her hand gripped the microphone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She tried to speak, but only a faint broken whisper escaped before she snapped her mouth shut again. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every crack in her mask, broadcasting her silence to tens of millions of stunned viewers. The audience in the chamber was struck dumb, their shock heavier than applause or outrage. They had heard it themselves, the First Lady's own words, a plan whispered in secret, now echoing across the nation. Jasmine sat perfectly still, her eyes locked on Melania, her silence louder than any speech. The world had just heard the ring was never just jewelry. It was the symbol of an exit strategy, a truth too sharp to deny. The chamber was still vibrating from the damning recording when Melania suddenly exploded. She shot to her feet, her chair screeching across the floor, her voice rising high, sharp enough to cut through the storm of whispers. Her eyes burned, flashing with fire as she pointed a trembling hand toward the panel. "You turned me into a traitor. But I was the First Lady of the United States. I stood before the entire world. I endured everything to protect my son." Her words cracked like thunder, raw and desperate, a queen fighting to keep her crown. For a fleeting second, the room answered. A few scattered claps rang out from sympathetic allies, echoing weakly against the marble walls. But they died quickly, drowned by the heavy silence that followed. The support was paper-thin, brittle, unable to mask the fear spreading through the chamber. Jasmine didn't move. She locked eyes with Melania, her voice cold, sharp as glass. "Yes, you stood before the world, but when you prepared to leave this country with your son, you represented no one but yourself." The line landed like a blade. The hall froze. Breaths held. The silence was deadly, the kind that comes right before the final strike. The deadly silence cracked when Jasmine leaned into the microphone, her tone steady and commanding. "I called David Marks," she announced, former logistics aide to the White House. Heads turned as a nervous man in his 50s walked forward, his hands trembling as he clutched a folder. He raised his right hand, swore the oath before Congress, and then lowered his eyes to the table. His voice trembled, but carried through the chamber. "On November 8, 2016, Mrs. Melania Trump instructed me to prepare moving arrangements out of Trump Tower. I scheduled the move for November 15th. After Mr. Trump's victory, the order was canceled immediately. The words detonated like dynamite. A storm of gasps rolled across the chamber. Reporters lurched forward and pens flying across notepads, cameras flashing with relentless fury. The audience outside watching on screens clutched their mouths in disbelief. The weight of the testimony pressed hard on every ear, the idea sinking in Melania had planned an escape. Members of Congress exchanged sharp looks, some whispering fiercely to their aides. The atmosphere thickened until it was hard to breathe. Jasmine didn't let the silence linger. She stood calm but fierce and pulled another document from her folder. With a flick of her wrist, she held it high, then projected it on the LED screen for all to see. It was a receipt and official moving order. The ink was clear, the seal from the company intact, and at the bottom in unmistakable cursive was the signature M. Trump. A collective gasp surged once more. Some in the room groaned aloud. Others leaned back in shock, as if the air had been punched from their lungs. Melania reacted instantly, fury exploding across her face. She slammed a hand against the table, her voice ringing out sharp and defiant. "That was only precaution. I never intended to leave. It was simply an option, nothing more." Her accent cut through the chamber like glass, her tone dripping with rage. She stood tall again, trying to wrap herself in the armor of authority, but her hands trembled against the microphone. The cracks in her mask were plain for all to see. Jasmine struck back with surgical precision. Her voice was calm, but deadly, each word deliberate. Precaution does not require a signed deposit. Precaution does not cancel on the very morning of a victory. This was not theory. This was action. And the truth is clear, power pulled you back. Her gaze locked onto Melania's, unblinking, merciless. The statement dropped into the chamber like a hammer blow, sealing the point beyond denial. The chamber erupted. Senators pounded on tables, reporters shouted over each other, microphones buzzed as networks scrambled to push breaking news alerts. Melania, moving out, documented, screamed across television chyrons. Outside, millions of Americans sat frozen before their screens, watching history rip through the glossy image of the First Lady. The noise was deafening, a roar of disbelief and outrage, the kind of chaos that no amount of spin could bury. And in that storm, everyone knew the knockout was almost complete. The moment the chamber erupted, the consequences detonated outside the building within minutes. Traders watching the hearing slammed sell orders, and the ticker tied to Trump Organization holdings plunged like a stone. Financial anchors barked breaking banners, analysts stammered, and a market-wide halt briefly kicked in as volatility spiked. Charts bled red, while commentators replayed the clip of the ring and the moving receipt in an endless loop. Panic selling one desk muttered as valuations evaporated in the span of a commercial break. By the closing bell, billions in paper wealth had vanished, and the brand looked suddenly mortal and very exposed. On Capitol Hill, the political shockwave came just as fast. Senior committee members stepped to microphones and demanded immediate inquiries into misrepresentation, public ethics, and potential financial deception. "We will open hearings and issue subpoenas." One senator vowed, jaw-tight, cameras inches from his face. Staffers rushed draft letters to the Department of Justice and the New York Attorney General asking for coordination. A bipartisan murmur, rare and razor-edged, moved through the halls. The public deserved the whole record. The word investigation stopped being a threat and became a calendar appointment. On the street and on screens, anger found its target. The carefully polished image of a loyal wife cracked, replaced by a stinging label, repeated by callers and hosts alike opportunists. Viral montages spliced hand withdrawal receipt, and the whispered line about freedom, and the verdict spread faster than any press release. Talk radio burned late-night shows, sharpened their knives, and daytime panels filled with callers who felt duped. "She stood for herself, not for us," one voice said, echoing through 1,000 comment threads. The court of public opinion did not wait for subpoenas. It delivered its ruling by dinner. Inside the complex, the human cost showed first. Barron's name surged on search charts, and producers booked family dynamics experts to discuss a teenager caught in a national crossfire. Headlines softened when they reached him. Sympathy gathered like rain, framing him as the unintended victim of a Cold War waged by adults. Then the doors swung open, and Melania emerged, head-lowered, shoulders fixed, moving through a tunnel of cameras and shouted questions. She said nothing. Flash after flash swallowed her like lightning as security guided her to the car, and the silence she left behind felt heavier than any denial. By the time her motorcade cleared the curb, the ripple had become a riptide. Business channels kept the plunging chart on split screen, while committees posted formal notice of investigative intent. Call-in lines jammed, donors froze checks, brand partners quietly asked for clarity before the next event. Across kitchen tables and factory floors, people argued over loyalty and leverage over marriage and masks, but the verdict felt settled. The faithful image was gone, replaced by a single brutal frame, a diamond meant for departure, and a sun caught in the middle. And the markets, the Congress, and the crowd all moved in the same direction, down, forward, and away for now only. The uproar in the chamber had reached its peak, but Jasmine remained steady. Slowly, deliberately, she gathered the documents back into the red folder that had set the nation on fire. She pressed it shut with both hands as though closing a chapter that could never be opened the same way again. The room followed her every move, the sound of cameras clicking, filling the silence like rain on glass. Then she rose, her eyes steady and hard, her posture unshakable. Her gaze swept the chamber, the senators, the journalists, the millions unseen beyond the cameras. Her voice rang out calm, yet cutting, each word chosen with the weight of final judgment. Today is not just the story of a marriage. Today is the truth. Power cannot replace love, and power cannot replace honesty. The words struck like hammer blows, reverberating in the chamber and bouncing back through the screens into living rooms across the country. People listening at home leaned closer, transfixed by the cadence, the clarity, the courage in her tone. For a moment, the nation held still, caught between shame and revelation. She turned a page on the podium, though she didn't need notes. Marriage must be built on trust, not on contracts, she declared, her voice rising just enough to pierce every corner of the chamber. Her words lingered heavy and human, cutting through the marble grandeur of the hall. A family cannot be held hostage by ambition. A nation cannot survive on lies. We need truth. Without it, nothing stands. The statement fell like thunder, and the silence that followed felt sacred, as though no one dared to breathe. Around the chamber, eyes welled with tears, especially among the older audience members who had lived long enough to know the sting of betrayal. Cameras zoomed in on faces streaked with emotion, lips trembling as the message sank deep. Across the country, in homes where televisions blared, people over 50 leaned back in their chairs, eyes glistening, some whispering to themselves in agreement. They felt her words not as political theater, but as personal testimony. The generation that had seen marriages rise and fall, that had fought for family values, now nodded with solemn recognition. The applause began quietly, a slow clap from one corner of the chamber. Then another joined, and another, until the room thundered with hands crashing together, echoing like a drumbeat of approval. Jasmine stood still, letting the wave rise around her, her face resolute. The ovation swelled until it was deafening, a roar of catharsis, of fury, turned into acknowledgement. It wasn't just applause for her performance. It was for the truth she had laid bare, for the courage to voice what millions had suspected but never seen confirmed. Melania sat still in her chair, but the light had gone from her face. Her hands clutched at the table as though it were the only anchor left. The mask of elegance cracked under the harsh glow of the cameras, and her silhouette seemed smaller, weaker, diminished by the truth now made public. For decades she had worn jewels and gowns as armor, but now she looked exposed, fragile in a way that money and titles could not disguise. Jasmine did not look at her again. Instead, she lifted her chin and looked toward the audience, toward the cameras, toward the millions who had waited for this moment. She spoke not as a congresswoman, but as a voice of conscience. Truth is painful. It will wound us. It will strip away what we thought we knew. But truth is what frees us. It frees a person, it frees a family, and it frees a nation. Her words, slow and deliberate, cut like a blade wrapped in mercy. In living rooms, in diners, in hospital waiting areas, in veterans' halls, Americans sat spellbound. Some whispered yes under their breath. Others closed their eyes, tears falling freely. Older men, veterans, fathers, grandmothers, people who had seen leaders come and go, felt the sting of betrayal, but also the cleansing relief of honesty. They saw in Jasmine a figure who dared to slice through deception, who spoke for them when they had felt silenced. The cameras panned back to Melania, her head bowed now, hair falling forward to hide her face. The applause did not die down. It grew louder, rising into a storm. Jasmine stepped back from the table and began to walk toward the exit. The sound followed her like a tide, swelling, echoing off marble pillars, shaking the very bones of the chamber. Each step she took was deliberate, heavy with meaning, as though she carried the weight of the truth itself out into the open air. Reporters shouted questions, but their voices were drowned in the noise. Photographers surged forward, flashes exploding like white lightning, but Jasmine didn't flinch. Her pace was steady, her eyes locked on the double doors at the far end of the chamber. Behind her, Melania remained in darkness, shoulders hunched, surrounded by aides who looked helpless, their whispers lost in the cacophony. The symbolism was impossible to ignore, one woman walking into light, the other swallowed by shadow. The audience at home saw it too. On split screens, networks broadcast Jasmine's departure in slow motion, her face illuminated by the glare of flashbulbs while Melania remained a dim, hunched figure at the table. Commentators barely spoke. The images told the story louder than any words. The sound of applause poured through the speakers like a flood. Viewers could almost feel the vibration in their chests, the roar of approval that refused to die down. As Jasmine reached the doorway, the ovation peaked, a thunderclap of collective release. She paused, turned slightly, and gave one last look back, not at Melania, but at the chamber, at the country she served. Her expression was not triumphant, but resolute, carrying the weight of what had been said and done. Then she stepped into the light, swallowed by the flash of cameras, embraced by the roar of voices, calling for truth. Back inside, the scene was stark. Melania slumped lower in her chair, her face hidden, her body language defeated. The image of the loyal First Lady was gone. In its place was a woman cornered by her own choices, stripped of the illusion of control. She remained behind as Jasmine disappeared into brightness, the chamber still vibrating with applause. The moment sealed itself into memory. For millions watching, it was not just political theater, it was a reckoning, a reminder, a lesson. Trust is the foundation of marriage. Families cannot be pawns in the game of ambition, and a nation bruised but unbroken cannot live on lies. It must have truth, even if the truth burns. And so it ended, Melania sinking into shadow, Jasmine carried forward by light and thunder, and America left breathless, shaken, but awake. The roar of applause still echoed in the chamber when the story detonated worldwide. Within minutes, international networks cut into programming with urgent banners. On BBC, anchors leaned forward, eyes wide, as the infamous clip replayed Donald Trump, extending his hand, Melania pulling back, her face carved in ice. The French broadcaster called it the gesture that shattered the myth. German papers plastered headlines about betrayal and ambition, while in Asia, talk shows looped the same slow-motion image, framing it as a symbol of broken loyalty. Social feeds from Tokyo to Paris carried the same haunting question: a wife or a prisoner? The picture became an icon, transcending language, carrying the weight of scandal into every corner of the globe. Back in Washington, the political machine cracked under the pressure. Republican leaders emerged with forced smiles, but microphones caught their hesitation. Some tried to defend, others dodged, and still others quietly distanced themselves. A rift split the party lines. Loyalists clung to the Trump name, while pragmatists whispered about survival. Analysts declared on live television that Donald Trump's standing had never been so fragile. His once untouchable aura now trembled with every replay of the damning footage. By nightfall, potential candidates for the 2028 race gave curt answers, steering clear of any mention of the Trump family. "We're focused on the future," one said, his eyes darting nervously away from the cameras. The dynasty that once commanded fear now looked radioactive. Across America, the debate spread like wildfire. Coffee shops, factory floors, and family dinner tables buzzed with argument. Talk radio lines jammed as callers shouted over one another, some furious, some grieving, some bitterly vindicated. Social media bled with hashtags, commentary, and raw emotion. But beneath the shouting, one sentiment ran steady and clear: the myth of a perfect, untouchable family had crumbled. The image of loyalty, the fairy tale of devotion, was exposed as theater. Ordinary people, especially the older generation, felt both betrayed and relieved. They saw confirmation of what their instincts had whispered for years: power had been hiding cracks that love could not fill. In the aftermath, one name rose above the chaos: Jasmine Crockett. Overnight, her face filled screens, her words quoted in every language. Commentators called her fearless, unshakable, a woman who faced down the Golden Empire and did not blink. Op-eds hailed her as a new kind of leader, not chasing spectacle, but wielding evidence like a sword. Among younger women, she became an instant icon. Among older audiences, she was embraced as the rare politician who spoke plain truth without compromise. Her legacy was sealed not in laws or policies, but in courage and the willingness to say what others feared, that even the powerful must answer to the truth. She herself summed it best, her words now replayed like scripture. Standing in the chamber folder, closed eyes unflinching, Jasmine declared, "Truth can hurt us. It can strip us bare. But truth is what saves us." And today, America chose truth. The lines spread across the country like a flame in dry grass. It was scrawled on protest signs, quoted on church pulpits, replayed in ads and campaign rallies. For once, Democrats and independence veterans and teachers, factory workers and farmers repeated the same words with pride. They believed again, not in perfection, but in honesty. The broadcast closed with images that felt cinematic. Cameras panned across the dome of the Capitol, its marble glowing under the fading light of dusk. Outside, the American flag snapped in the wind, its colors fierce against the sky. The soundtrack of the moment wasn't crafted, it was real. The thunder of crowds outside chanting in unison, their voices pounding, the single word that captured it all: justice. The chant rose and fell, echoing through the streets, bouncing off stone and steel, reaching the ears of millions who felt history tilt in real time. And as the flag whipped above Congress, the story etched itself into memory. The scandal had broken myths, shaken a dynasty, and split a party. But more than anything, it had given the nation a moment of raw clarity. A reminder that the truth, however brutal, is the only thing that endures. Thank you for watching until this moment, and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.